Ty West is the kind of filmmaker that sort of, he's very aware, he also a cinephile. He's very aware of sort of the tropes of various genres, horror in particular, but as you'll see here, Western as well. And he kind of likes to subvert them and embrace them at the same time. And it probably doesn't make any sense when I'm saying it, but when you see it on the screen, you'll get it. So before we start the movie, let us bring up our guest, Ty West, to introduce.
All right, Chicago. That was very flattering to hear you guys that were here for the Innkeepers. I was here too, I remember that. I don't have too much to add. I don't like to talk too much before a movie. Thank you so much for having me. This is one of my favorite theaters in the entire country, so I wouldn't miss it for the world. This is not a horror movie. I think you know that, but some people think, no, it'll secretly be. It's not secretly, it's a Western. So I hope you like Westerns. And the only thing I kind of would say before it, to add to sort of what Steve was saying, was I wanted to make like a violent sort of revenge Western in which the archetypes in the film weren't really able to handle the situation they got themselves into. So take that for what it's worth, and we can talk about that afterwards. And I'll be here for your Q&A, and I hope you dig the movie, and thanks again.
Thanks for sticking around. Let's bring Ty West, the writer, director, editor, everything. Thanks, guys. I knew I was full in on this movie when I saw the opening credits. Tell me what, who did them, and then what was sort of what did you want us to feel from that moment on? What was the vibe you were going for once you said those are the credits that I want to do?
Well, the credits were done by a guy named Neil Jonas, who's done the visual effects on several of my movies, and he's just a brilliant, talented artist. And this is more or less his first stab at it, and I was like, well, that's the most amazing thing I've ever seen. But I think, in addition to your question, my feeling was that the opening scene and the credits, so when you watch the opening scene with Ethan and Vern Gorman, and then you watch the opening credits, and when that's done, if you're not into it, you're probably never gonna be into it. But if you're into it, hopefully you're this shit's gonna get insane. And it may get insane in a way that you weren't expecting. It may be different than you were expecting, but that was the hope, is that it sets a tone for the movie that I'm not really sure what's coming next, and it's something sort of familiar, but something exciting and something different. And that was the hope with it, is just to really set a tone of you don't I got you, and you're either in or you're out, and you're either gonna come along for the ride with me, or you're gonna be that movie wasn't for me. But you will know, 6 minutes in.
Yeah, you came out of your film before this, The Sacrament, was inherently and deliberately uncinematic, and so
yes.
Was this sort of you going, okay, I'm not just gonna make a movie again, but I'm gonna make the best looking movie that I've ever made, and just go full bore. I mean, was that sort of were you trying to sort of go completely in the other direction with this one?
100%, yeah. As a filmmaker, it takes a very long time to make a movie, and it's a really kind of traumatic experience. And so, it's generally about 2 years between making, if you're lucky, it's 2 years between making it and traveling around to things like this to talk about it, things like that. And you really get pretty damn exhausted of your movie or whatever you just made. And so we made The Sacrament, and The Sacrament was a movie that I really wanted to, I don't know if you guys have seen that, but it was a movie that was all about realism, and it was like an anti-cinematic movie in that it was this kind of fake Vice documentary, and it was really masquerading as that. And it was a grim movie, a real, you walk out of that movie oof. And that was the point. The point was it was about violence, and it was about horror, and it was about it making it real, and so for the horror fans to almost be that was a little much for me. And that was the goal, was to try to make something that actually felt truly disturbing and upsetting, because violence is that way. But having made that movie, which is kind of anti-cinematic, as you were saying, my first thought is I want to make something that completely embraces what I love about movies and embraces cinema. And I wanted to make something that was not steeped in realism, because The Sacrament is all about realism, and I don't care that much about realism. That was just a movie I was making. And so to go and make a movie like this, and to do a very traditional, the most American cinematic genre, to me, is the Western, and it's a genre that I love dearly. I wanted to make a super cinema. I mean, cinema is a very odd semanticsy kind of word, but like a very cinema-driven movie. And I thought, like, let's take a shot at it with a Western and do something kind of different. And that's how it came to be.
And I know, I mean, both of us, we talked about this in Austin, that like Westerns are in our DNA. I remember watching them with my dad, who was like his favorite genre. And
it is a dad genre.
It is.
Like,
no, if your dad is more
they're
than
like Westerns, and then oddly enough, it's more like the Clint Eastwood thing. Like I feel like Dirty Harry is a dad genre.
But I think that came out of loving him in Westerns.
Sure,
like,
but also like movies like Hamburger Hill that like no one talks about anymore, but that was like such a dad movie.
If you had an army dad, yeah, probably.
See? All your dads watched Hamburger Hill, and you don't even remember that movie. You know it exists because your dad watched it, but you're like, I can't really tell you what happens in Hamburger, but it's a dad movie.
See, so it never, in watching the film, in watching the film, it never, like the code that exists in a world where it is perfectly acceptable for a man to kill this many people because they killed his dog, I never even questioned that, like, which is really messed up. But like, this is a world where I get that. I've seen enough Westerns to know that that's sacred stuff. And I mean, talk about just writing that, because I don't think you've ever really tackled a world where like that, that's okay, and it is. It is.
You mean the fact that he just kills everybody? Yeah, I mean, I always had this idea that like this would be a revenge movie, and that I made it about a dog because I don't really think of the movie about being about killing the dog. Like that happens in the movie, but I think it's much more about the characters. And to me, the movie's about how different people are affected by violence and how they handle it. But I just thought, like, okay, if there's a movie where somebody, in this case a dog, is killed halfway through, and that's the plot driver for revenge. How do these people really deal with that? And I thought it would be interesting that the guy who's like the hero, or our main character, when he comes back to kill everyone, which you all want him to kill everybody because, like, dude, the dog scene's a bum out. So, like, you really want him to get revenge. But when you actually start seeing him get revenge and the bad guys start to become more like real, likable people and less like the archetypes they started as, to me, it creates an odd conflict of like, I mean, I want him to kill everybody, but like, this is a dog, this is getting crazy, it's the 1800s, and that feeling that I was just sort of like articulating like that is what the movie is about to me. Is those things that are rarely in movies, and those are the things about like, well, yeah, he's gonna come kill everybody, and then the main character almost becomes the bad guy, even though the bad guy's the bad, but there are no bad guys, and that's the point I was trying to make, is that there's no good guys, there's no bad guys, there's just these situations, and then how do these characters exist and handle these situations? And in the case of this movie, I was like, oh, they're all going to handle it really poorly.
Well, I love that Travolta he's the smartest guy in the movie, first of all. He's the only one with any just like, hey, can we just step back here?
He's the only one that's like, I've seen this shit before. Everybody shut up before this gets crazy. And of course, nobody can.
And he sees Ethan Hawke, he's like, this guy is damaged. He's going to hurt us. And he knows that, and it doesn't make
well, I mean, also, I mean, the scene in the street when he gets in the fight is like, that's everyone in this thing knows about, you've been out some night in Wrigleyville or whatever, and there's some loud dude talking shit on the street, and the dude that talks shit's never the toughest guy, you know? And but that's the way it goes, is like that sort of bully person, and then once the thing that's interesting about violence and upsetting about violence is that, you know, if that had not happened, then the movie wouldn't happen. But because he got humiliated, he can't handle it, and he can't move past it, and things just escalate. And that's to me what for lack of a better term, like the thesis of the movie is about, is just sort of like that. And that's this is a little corny to say, but like the title, it's in a ballet, but that was the point to me, is that all these people are stuck in this violent situation, and they can't get out of it because everybody keeps making it worse. And that's just what people, in my experience, that's what people do. You know better, but you make it worse anyway because your ego's at stake or whatever it may be.
Did you realize when you were writing it that it was going to, because it's really funny in places. I mean, darkly so, but I laugh a lot watching this. And I was just here for the last 20 minutes or so, and you guys were laughing at some of the part. But did you intend to be that funny, or was that something that kind of came in with certain actors, or how did that work exactly?
Yes, it was written to be funny. I mean, it's definitely gallows humor, so if you were laughing, like, we're the same kind of people, which is questionable. And certainly if you've seen my other movies, like, so you're coming from like liking horror movies, and then you see a movie like this, you probably have a certain kind of like cinematic IQ to like, get the subversion of all of it, I hope. But yes, it was always written to be funny in the sort of situational absurdity of it all. And absurd is a word that's probably accurate to what the script was. But say when Travolta signed on, and I saw him doing it, it took it one step up. When James Ranson signed on, it just all kind of inched its way. Tyson, Karen, everyone kind of just nudged it a little further, which I embraced, because like that to me was about I said before, about like the cinema of the movie, is a movie that feels, this is not about realism, this is about the experience of seeing this movie and the subtext of the movie, and it's a performance-driven movie. So it was a movie in which they could really sort of embrace that. And then Ethan, being the straight character, doesn't get quite as many of the sort of laughs, and that's great, because he anchors the movie, and that's really like sort of the brilliance of Ethan, is to be able to like hold this movie together that is otherwise an insane movie. But that was always the goal.
One of the, we were talking before, and I said in the introduction that you subvert so many of these wonderful Western tropes, one of which is that the hero of the piece will more than likely end up with a female lead, one of the female leads. And I just love that when Thaisa just sort of assumes that they're going to run away together, he's like, what the hell is this? Like, I don't want anything to do, he's not prepared, that's not part of his agenda. But again, like did you tell me which ones you sort of wanted to knock down a little, and which ones you wanted to just throw your arms around in terms of the elements of the Western?
Well, it's about this sort of ensemble of characters all having their own drives in the movie or whatnot, or everyone's trying to like basically do things for themselves, and they don't always know they're doing that. That's what. So for Thaisa, it's like, this is my chance. My life sucks, but this is a chance to get out. But like, no, it's not. Like, that's the movie thing. That's what happens in movies, but in like real life, that doesn't happen. So I wanted to sort of put these archetypes in there where she's like, oh, this guy could whisk me away, and it's like, no, this dude's fucked up. Like, he would be a terrible person to go off with, and it would only be a disaster if you were to do that. And that just, to me, I was just sort of like, well, that seems like what would happen. So that's kind of where it came from. But yeah, it wasn't a conscious effort to like do the opposite of what you expect, but it was more like, okay, you set up all these archetypes that you're familiar with, and you give people time to like, through the title sequence, through the cinematography, through the performances, to like latch on, and then you start having these characters behave not quite like movie characters, but like real people. But they're still in a very like movie, but I hope that all of you were like, no, I see what she's doing, or I see what he's doing, or I see that like she's just using him because her life sucks, and Gilly's the only thing she's got, even though he sucks too. And like, it's like you see everyone just trying to make the best of what they can do. And I think that's, to me, that's what I see that in a lot of people in general, is everybody's just kind of trying to get by. And then this is just a crazy movie version of that. But just to apply it to life, I just think, you know, people are trying to just get by.
Tell me about your dog actor. He's the best actor, period. He's the greatest animal actor I've ever seen.
Not only that, it's a gender-bending performance, because Jumpy is a male dog and plays Abby in the film. I mean, we're breaking many grounds with this film. So Jumpy is, in my life, one of the greatest things I've been able to experience. I wrote a movie about a dog and then thought, what have I done? Because everyone says like kids and animals are impossible. Turns out, kids are harder. I don't know where you would think I would find this dog. I will tell you, I found it on YouTube. I literally like typed in like talented dog, and like the first video I watched is when you guys get home tonight, the first thing you should do is sit down and Google Jumpy and just enjoy. Because anything that's in this movie, everything that Jumpy can do that's truly amazing, I couldn't put in the movie. It was too much. Like the rolling up in the blanket thing was that's ground floor Jumpy. So Jumpy could walk across the street on his back legs and open the saloon doors with his paws. But you all would have left if that was what happened in the movie. So it changed all of you who have dogs. You are wasting your dog's potential. The dog is smarter than you're giving it credit for. I saw Jumpy take the card key for the hotel and swipe it through the door and then open the door. I saw Jumpy walk up and down stairs on just his front legs. I saw Jumpy do a trick where there would be like 4 people standing about 5 people apart, and you say, everyone pick numbers between 1 and 10, and they'll go 2, 7, 6, 4, he'll go Jumpy, go to 4. He'll go and put his paw on the foot of the person who said 4. I assume he speaks English. I don't know what's going on. And Jumpy has this wonderful trainer named Omar, and Omar trained the dog Uggy from The Artist. Which again, I got there by YouTube. And so I thought I was gonna have to go to like, someplace in Florida and figure all this stuff out. And no, it was like in the Valley in LA, and I took him out to lunch, and I was like, we're gonna make this movie, and I think he was skeptical because I think a lot of people talk about movies. I was like, no, we're really gonna do it. And then we really did. And I think, yeah, it was just, then I started writing things for Jumpy to do because I was like, wow, I have this amazing talent that I wasn't expecting. I just thought if anything, truly the most amazing thing Jumpy could do is like, when Ethan's riding into town on that horse and Jumpy's with, like, just for a second, try to figure out how to do that. Like, that's not Ethan's dog. How does the dog just walk with the horse in that wide shot the whole way? Because Jumpy can just do that because you go, Jumpy, go with, and he'll just go. And it's the most amazing thing I've ever seen. And like that alone is just amazing. So we got to basically, what I think is photograph scenes in a movie with a dog that like, I don't think I've ever seen anything like that before. And even in like the sort of dog-driven-y movies, it's not like that. It's more cut together, but we were able to actually Jumpy just exist in the scenes and perform in the scenes, and it's I mean, thank you YouTube, because it's the whole movie sort of is I mean, it's an amazing thing that we were able to find Jumpy. So please go watch him ride skateboards.
You need to write a script that really can show us.
I did. It's called In a Valley of Violence.
So I'm gonna ask one more question. We have a microphone here. If any of you guys want to line up, ask some questions. Just more in general, I mean, in the last year, we had Slow West here last year, Hateful Eight open, Bone Tomahawk open, Magnificent Seven is coming out soon with Ethan in it as well. How would you gauge the landscape for Westerns right now? I mean, is it coming back? Is it just sort of will we get 1 or 2 a year? Like how would you like to see it?
I would always like to see more because I love Westerns personally, but it feels like it's coming back because 1 or 2 a year seems like a real gift, like it seems like most years you don't get any. But I don't know what that means, a comeback or whatnot. But I think it's really great to see as many. I like Slow West. I loved Hateful Eight. I think Magnificent Seven looks really cool. I think like it's fun. I mean, it's a fun genre, and it's a fun genre that if you're familiar with Westerns, I think some people have this idea, like whether they're dad movies or not, people have this idea that Westerns are like an old man genre, and some are maybe, And maybe Quentin is maybe the best example of that they don't have to be that, maybe between Django and Hateful Eight, because he was on a scale that was so massive, so wide releasey and really in everybody's face. But it's such a cool cinematic genre, and me as someone who has like reverence for cinema and loves to come to places like we're in right now, in a big environment, and see things this way. I mean, just on a subtle level, some of the shots in this movie where there's these giant we're used to seeing movies now where people just work in like cubicles. And that's fine, because you're following the plot of the movie. But you're losing some of that visual aesthetic that I personally really love about movies. And the Western genre is one where you can really embrace that. And it's like, again, like I said with the dog, and just imagine doing it, like, it's not as like easy to like put an actor on a horse in character and like gallop through a scene and then jump off the horse and do, like that's a thing that a bunch of people had to like get together and figure out how to do and film it and then like throw it to you. And that's kind of the theatricality of making movies that I think we've lost a little bit, and I think that's really apparent in the Western genre. It's like, wow, there was a dog that could actually do that, and there was people that could actually do this, and that's really Ethan on the horse, and we really did it. And I think the Western genre is a big deal for that, and I think, to me personally, that's important.
All right, yes.
I suppose I have 2 questions, and I can go back in the line and ask one after each other.
I think we can handle it.
I suppose the first one is, as you mentioned earlier, Sacrament is meant to be very realistic. Did you specifically choose that almost Jonestown type event to say this really happened and we can pull from it and use from it and kind of model around it? Or what was the main drive behind, I mean, besides the realistic violence, what was the main drive for that film?
It was connected to that, meaning I wanted to use, in making a movie that was like heavily realistic and heavily, the impact of violence being really steeped in realism, I wanted to pick a real event and then fictionalize it, but let everybody know it's a real event. And I wanted to use a real brand. And if I couldn't have got a real brand, or couldn't have used, I guess I could have always used real stories, but if I couldn't have done those 2 things, it defeated the purpose of what I was trying to do, because what I was trying to do is take the experience of seeing horror movies, which is a lot of times an escapism experience, and a lot of times an experience that becomes like people's heads get cut off and everybody cheers. And I wanted to be like, no, in this one, when someone's gonna take off, it's like you might leave the theater because it's a bum out. And I wanted to see if I could do that, and I wanted to see if I could bring like movie violence to a place that wasn't exploitative, because that's easy to do. But to do something that felt not exploitative, but actually felt genuinely upsetting. And that was really the goal from it. And so by trying to anchor it into real things, that was part of the sort of, for lack of a better term, experiment in doing that. And what's question two?
Question two is, moving forward, you know, you've done several horror films previously. This is obviously a Western. Where do you go forward? Do you go where you want to go and what interests you, or do you already know in a specific direction that you want to go?
I don't think I'm going to make any more horror movies, which just, that sounds like a bit, but not, like, I mean it like, I've made enough horror movies that it feels like I'm doing the same thing over and over again. I have a horror TV series that, which of course sounds like you just said you're not gonna be, but it's like, that's a long form, different kind of thing. And it's not like, it's rooted in something similar that I've done before, but the delivery of it is radically different. So that is interesting to me, and that would probably be my like, sort of like, swan song of doing horror thing, because I've made so many for the last 10 years, it's all I've done, that it's like, I have a couple scripts that didn't happen, a werewolf movie and so on and so forth, and like, I guess I would still make those. But otherwise, I've done it, you know, and it's hard. You spend 2 years of your life on it. It's hard to do 2 years on something that you're not super invested in. And then so the TV series may happen, or I'm going to do this 1960s like LSD hippie movie.
Hey, first off, thanks for coming out and congrats on the movie. You touched on a lot of great topics. I know with you being writer, director, and editor, when you're shooting, are you shooting pretty much what you know you need? I've got it, let's move on. Or are you shooting a lot and you said, you know what, when I get to post, I'll figure it out and we'll go from there? Or are you editing while you're shooting?
I'm mostly editing while I'm shooting. I shoot more than I used to because we have a little more money, not very much, but a little more. And I think I know I see the scene in my head before we shoot it, and then I shoot that. But I'll shoot in case I just fail, or in case I decide I'm wrong later. There's always like sort of a backup plan hidden in there, in like one bit of coverage or so. But it's not like, oh, we just shoot a bunch of generic stuff and we figure it out. That's not how I operate. I like live or die by the movie that, whatever made me get up in the morning and believe that I can make this movie, I try to stick with that the whole way through.
Oh, just we'll exaggerate, touch on that. As far as you believe in shooting a lot of coverage, or doing maybe more one shots, two shots, or believe more coverage when you're putting a scene together to give yourself options if you get to that point?
I believe that you shouldn't set yourself up to fail necessarily, but I wouldn't say it's all about options or anything. You know, coverage is such a weird, like, meaningless sort of word, but it's like, there's a version to it. Like, if you're trying to do something bold, you may have a version to get out of that in case when you see it, you decide later, like, yeah. But I just like bolder filmmaking, and I like seeing choices made and living with them. I mean, that's the kind of movies that I like. So I try to see what the movie is in my head, and I just try to make that movie. And if I clumsily do it in a scene, I'll have a plan to get out of it and go, I never quite got that right, but I got that other shot, so I could just skip it. But no, I go in the morning with a plan, and I try to stick to that plan.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hello. You're actually one of my favorite directors, one of my favorite horror directors as well, so you're breaking my heart here. But
well, the movies will still be fucking weird.
Yeah, there we go. That's good. So I've noticed with a lot of your movies, there's a very, very slow build, sometimes with a pop in the middle. Yeah. So I enjoy the storytelling element. I'm wondering though, with that, as you move forward, and especially if you get on a project with a bigger budget, is that something that you intend to continue forward? And do you think something like that would mesh with the mainstream? I know there's like Tarantino, but outside of that kind of stuff, especially in horror, do you think that there's still room for that storytelling and building?
Well, I mean, of course there's room, but no, I don't think that will happen, because that's not, the reason that you identify me as something different is because it's not what is happening. So yeah, it could suddenly be a lot like this, but probably not. I think that's not, modern audiences are not coming from that same place. I think of movies, I have a great reverence for cinema, and I have a great reverence for screenwriters and a great reverence for directors. And I think that when I go see a movie, whatever my expectations are, if it's not that, like, I'll roll with it. I may not like it, but I'm not like freaked out by it. I think nowadays, if people go see a movie and the movie's something different than they think it is in their head, they have a resistance. And I think that'll happen with this movie sometimes too. Like, some people will be like, what, it's funny? And they won't be able to get past it. And I get it, but like, I don't do that. And I come to movies as in, like, you treat the movie like it's a real, like it's a movie, and then people take away from it what they will. So as far as like the slow burn thing, like, I get it. I'm not ignorant to what everyone's talking about, but it's not like a decision. It's just, this is the way I see movies, and I'm not in a hurry. I don't care about plot really, so I'm not like, we'll get there. By the time this movie's over, which is not that long, by the way, it's like an hour and 40 minutes, like, you'll be all right. Like, by the time that's done, we'll have wrapped up the plot. But like, what's your hurry? If you've got somewhere to be, then just don't come. You know what I mean? Like, that's the way that I look at movies. I understand that that's not how the current system works. So it's not like I'm oblivious to that. And as far as like a bigger budget thing, like, I don't know, I think the movies that I make will always be a bit esoteric and a bit idiosyncratic, and that may mean that the budgets always stay low. And if I were to do a big, giant movie that I didn't, write, direct, and things like that, I just directed, no, it would probably be like whatever the people paid for it is like. Because I would, when I make these movies, I create these movies and I'm looking for sort of investors in the movie. Whereas when you go and do a big, giant movie, I think my perspective as of right now on it is that you're kind of going into that more like they're your clients, and you're trying to give them what they want. And if you try to make it your own, like currently in 2016 in cinema, I don't know that making it your own is what, that's an uphill battle that it's almost like life's too short in a way. So either make it a small movie and make it the way you want, or just make it the way they want and cash in,
Thank you, just ask if you're right. Hey, wait, can I ask you something? The guy who just asked the question, did this, as a horror fan, did this still sort of scratch that itch for you? Like,
okay. Like you were saying, the Western thing is coming back. I love any kind of throwback movie, anything that can take the tropes of the genre and kind of reinvent it. And I just love you as a director. I think you have a good eye. I think I like that slow build. I like the storytelling elements, and I like the characters that you create. So definitely appreciate the movie.
So there's hope.
Thank you. I mean, that dog killing scene's a downer. And then the spurs at the end, that's violent. It's there. The movie's got violence in the title.
Yes.
First, I like all the nice things that guy said. So you kind of are known for being very genre aware and doing kind of a lot of tributes to genres as you make your movies. I was wondering first if that's something that you embrace or something you kind of want to avoid being typecast as, and then as a completely self-interested follow-up, have you considered doing that with sci-fi?
To backtrack, I almost made a sci-fi movie a few years ago. It was like this close, and it didn't happen, which is my fault. Yes, so therefore I did consider it, and when it didn't happen, it just seems like such a failure that going back to it is very hard to sort of, like, it's very hard to get up again, it's 2 years minimum. So like the endurance, the cardio that it takes to go the whole thing with a movie, if you're like, you shouldn't do it because it's gonna kill you. And that sounds absurd because we're making movies here, but it's like, try it and you will go crazy, because that's why directors are crazy people, because it's not a normal thing to do. And so in order to try to still be functional in life, you have to really believe in what you're doing so that every morning your decisions that you're making are not debatable in your head. Otherwise you will go insane. It's like a schizophrenic kind of thing. And so, so the sci-fi movie, I can't imagine going, that's not to say I wouldn't write another one, but the one that I almost made to go back to it is, I don't think I would do that. And the previous thing you said was I embrace genres, and do you think I'm gonna keep doing that?
Yeah, just do you want to avoid having that be like the thing that you do or I know that?
Specifically to horror?
No, just as a director, like, oh, he's the guy who does genre tribute sometimes.
I see. I think that's subjective. I don't think about it too much. I think about, modern times are not particularly cinematic to me. Like cell phones and the internet, it's like not really good for, unless your movie's really about that, like it's just like it kind of kills the whole suspension of disbelief. I'm just not into it. I'm not into what things look like now. We shot this movie on 35 millimeter. I'm not so into digital photography. There's just like so many things about like modern stories that I'm not that interested in. So I think the genre thing comes from just trying to like find this other, like for me to spend 2 years on a movie, like it was great to be in this weird Western universe, to be on a set that just like, it's like being in Disneyland. So you kind of transport yourself when you make it, and you're able to stay in some bizarre, I am able to stay in some strange, creative headspace. And I was able to do that. So I like making movies in different periods because you're already somewhere else. And so then you can kind of like explore that world. Whereas if you're making a movie that takes place, for me, making a movie that takes place like today, like outside on the street, we're just doing something. You know, it doesn't feel quite as exploratory to me, and that inhibits the creative drive for me. It may not always do that, but currently it does.
Hey, my question's very simple, very straightforward. You mentioned violence many times throughout this presentation.
It's not going to be a simple question.
What do you enjoy about violence?
I don't particularly enjoy violence necessarily. I mean, I think that there's a cinematic nature, exciting cinematic nature to it because you're able to experience it without it affecting you, and that this movie is in point to that. That like when you see how it actually affects people, it's like way worse than just watching it and enjoying it. There is like a weird fascination with it, and I guess it's escapism, but you're able to experience something that you don't actually want to experience in life, and you're able to experience it safely, and there's something kind of exciting about that. But I just think that violence definitely, and paranoia and fear and things, these are things that really affect people, and even if they affect them subconsciously, it's stuff that really motivates a lot of the decisions we make in life. Like something terrible that happened to you a long time ago really kind of defines the way you react to certain situations, and I find that interesting. So like, just briefly to say like, House of the Devil to me was a movie about like, it's a satanic horror movie, like all that. But it's also a movie about a girl that like has a crappy roommate and lives in a dorm, but doesn't have enough money to change that. So she makes a stupid decision that on any other day of the week, if she had money, would never take that ad. But because she has no other choice, you make it. And that to me is like what happens in the world. And so violence generally comes from people feeling like they don't have another option. And I just think that's psychologically interesting.
Do you enjoy situational violence or reactionary violence more so?
I don't have a preference. Happily retweet you.
The way you talk about him, your face lights up, you have like this gleefulness in your voice, and I want to see his work, but I want to know, is there any chance you would just focus a series of films on Jumpy?
I will try to include Jumpy in more projects for sure. I really mean that. Like, if I ever have a situation where I need a dog, it will only be that dog. I wish Jumpy was here. I could go home and he would answer the rest of the questions.
Hey, sorry, so just super quick. As a director, you're great and fantastic, and I love VHS. Is one of my favorite movies horror movies of the last decade. But you mentioned how you're kind of burnt out on horror movies in general, the whole process of making a movie and how it takes so long. And I happened to be watching the Screen television series the other day, and I saw that you were director on one of the episodes, and it was a great episode. And I just want to know if television series, you mentioned you may be involved in one. Is that something that is going to be refreshing for you? Is that something that's going to be sort of like a rebirth for your sort of being?
That's quite existential. I enjoy doing television. I enjoy doing Scream. I did a show called Wayward Pines recently, and I'm going to go back and do that. I find that to be, I really enjoy production on movies, and on TV you go and it's like a month and then it's done as opposed to 2 years. So I find it great. I find it enjoyable to like interpret the whether it's the writer or the showrunner or the net, whatever it is, interpret what they're looking for and then use my skill set to do that. And it feels far less precious to me, so it doesn't really, I don't feel as attached to it, and so I feel more open to collaboration, and it's appealing, and I like doing TV. My own TV series is like horror with a capital H. So, which is, I think is going to happen. I think you'll dig it. But yeah, it's not like anything I've done. It's like whatever was left for me to do in horror, I will do it in that TV series.
That's awesome. Thank you.
So the film opens, at least right now, it's scheduled to open in October, right? And
Yes.
So you have that long to tell people how great this movie is. Just keep, like every couple of weeks, just put reminders on your phone to like.
Please do that because
seriously.
we are not a gigantic movie. You know, we made this movie for pennies, and it's like literally like the reason I'm here is not to just necessarily promote the movie, but because like that experience of like hopefully connecting in a way is getting further and further removed. So as corny as it is to say, to tweet about and talk about it, like it keeps the blood flowing in a movie like this, and I genuinely mean that.
And a film like this, you know you want to tell people to see it in theaters, so let's like make that happen by just like keeping people interested and keeping people wanting to see it. Ty, thank you so much for bringing us with you and don't be in the lounge and talk. We're going to clear the theater. Thank you guys for coming out.
Thank you very much, everybody.